Okay, thank you everybody for coming. This is going to be a lot harder than I thought. We have about a couple of hours to share together, so I prepared for you a few of my projects that we can actually kind of summarize two classes that I'm teaching at ICP, both the street photography class and the more advanced one, which is the documentary project class, and give you a little bit of an understanding how complicated it might be or what do you guys need to do if you want to do a documentary project ever in your life. We're going to discuss also a little bit of technical parts and a lot of the practice, not only just see the pictures, but try to understand as photographers, what do you actually need to do and how do you do it. Again, we are talking about two 10-week course classes, so it's going to be a little bit limited. And I'm going to kind of ease through things. I've brought here like 4 different projects that I wanted to share with you, specifically with all kinds of points. And if we're going to have a little bit more time, maybe I'll also show the 5th, time dependent. Before we start, a little bit about myself. Dave did a pretty good job already talking, but I'm 40. I turned 40 a few months ago. I'm originally born and raised in Israel, and I moved to New York about 4.5 years ago to do my master's in fine arts at the School of Visual Arts, after which I decided to just stay in New York and continue working here. But photography is actually my second career. There's a place here. Yeah. Photography is my second career. This was my first. I have a bachelor's degree in computer science and economics and a master's degree in business administration. Before I came here and did, as I said, the master's in fine arts. So before moving into photography, I was many years in computers. And a few months ago, I kind of opened the folder of my passport and I found this old business card from over 10 years ago that says I'm a R&D development group manager. I was afterwards also in marketing, but back in 2002, I started 2003. I got a break starting working for Time Out Tel Aviv, a small magazine then proportionally. It was just about 3-4 weeks after it came to Tel Aviv. And it started as a small gig that I was doing in parallel to my day job in computers. I never thought that it would ever develop, but a few months later I found myself photographing my first cover ever, which I was really happy with. And things developed very, very fast. In 8 months' time, I found myself photographing for 2 groups of magazines in Israel, for a few websites, a few commercial clients. And I was at some kind of standpoint that I had to make a choice between one career or the other. And what happened was that I went to Burning Man Festival in Nevada. I wanted to go there, and I kind of convinced 2 magazines to send me there on assignment, which they did. It was an amazing assignment, 1 week of pure photography. And coming back, I came through a festival which I recommend all of you guys to go. It's called Visa pour l'Image in the south of France, in a small town called Perpignan. It always happens at the end of August, beginning of September. It's the most important festival in the world for documentary and news photography. And going there, I spent there about 3 days, and it clearly opened my eyes to how big this world can be and how high can one aspire to. The next step was to go home and quit my job, which sounds very, it was a little bit weird, but that was for me the most native thing to do. And I was 30 at the time, no wife, no kids, so I was on my own to make my own mistakes, and I didn't want to do the mistake of waking up too late and saying I had the opportunity, but I didn't actually seize on it. So this is how it all started. And for that specific at that specific time, I was mostly an editorial photographer working for magazines, doing either lifestyle. I was photographing food and people and nightlife and things on the stage, everything that you see now in Time Out, for instance, also here in New York, but also for other magazines as well. I was also being a commercial photographer, photographing for all kinds of clients. And I didn't even see myself as an artist at that point. I did know that I always the reason I went into photography was documentary photography. I was fascinated by people and I always wanted to tell their story. And I was a self-taught photographer. My only education was actually a workshop that I took in 2003 in documentary photography. The first project which I did, and I always tell that to my students, I really messed it up. It was a project that I did at Burning Man Festival, and I really managed to mess it up, but I learned a lot from it, which was very valuable for the second project I did, which was called Shirat Hayam. Shirat Hayam in Hebrew is Song of the Sea. And in 2004, sorry, this is a little bit of a small map, which I managed to find on the web. In 2004, Israel still had 21 settlements in Gaza Strip, which you see here, and another four settlements in the West Bank. This is Gaza Strip, and those black dots are settlements that no longer exist. Israel, since 1967, that area was conquered after the 6 Days War. Israel started building their Jewish settlements. And in 2004, Israel's Prime Minister, then Ariel Sharon, initiated a program which is called the Disengagement Program of evacuating those settlements. Now, here I was, a guy from Tel Aviv, very liberal city, very left-wing city, and starting to face this situation that everybody's starting to talk about Gaza and about evacuating those settlements. So I really did not understand those people, and why did they even want to go leaving Gaza and why not live in Tel Aviv, right? So whenever I don't understand somebody, that's for me that's my photography, my passport to try and understand them, and I always get interested. So what I did, well, actually, we'll go to this picture in a little bit. I asked a friend of mine, a photographer called Limor. She was a photojournalist for the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. If we can take her car and just drive through Gush Katif, through Gaza. I just wanted to see the place, and I wanted to see what it's all about. And since she already knew it, she could kind of show me around. So we went around, and all this area, mostly this area here. This was a little bit too dangerous for us to go to. So we went all through this. Everything that you see here in green is Palestinians, all of it. And this is Gaza, which is very highly condensed area. Deir el-Balah and Han Yunis are two refugee camps, extremely high populated as well. So we took this road here and went all through the settlements. And coming back, we went to this place, which is called Shirat Hayam, which you see here. Now, this is Shirat Hayam. It's a settlement of 16 families living on a beach. They live in caravans that they planted there about 4.5 years before I arrived there. The caravans are about 50 yards from the beach. And right after the caravans, you see these houses, which are destroyed houses of what used to be a recreation resort for the Egyptian army before Israel occupied Gaza. And then we have even less than 50 yards, and you have this concrete wall, which is followed by another wall, another fence. And after the fence, there's thousands of Palestinians, like these guys, that are not necessarily very friendly. So I had there 16 families living on a beach, beautiful, beautiful area, but immediately afterwards, an unbelievable, conflict. This was one of the pictures I took, or this is one of the houses that were destroyed, and I found there a horse as I was walking along. So this one and this one were the two first pictures I took there in 1st of October 2004. I was quite amazed that, to go to the beach, you actually have to, at that point at least, go with a gun. I knew at that point that the place just fascinated me, and as the months continued, I returned to Shirat Hayam or Gush Katif many times, and I knew that I wanted to do a documentary project. I just didn't know what. Now, there was a lot of photographers coming there and thinking about, okay, this is going to go crazy and we need to do something. And it was pretty easy for me to go for a very high-profile political project. But I didn't really want that. Israel was really torn between two sides. There was the pro-disengagement and the anti-disengagement activists. And I wanted to focus on something that was much more personal. I think that afterwards also led me throughout my career. I wanted to focus on the people and how they were affected by the situation. So after about a little bit over half a year of going around and photographing a lot of places, it came to me that what I wanted to do is tell the story of Shirat Hayam, that weird place that I came to the first time I came to Gush Katif. That place touched me. So I decided to embark on a project. And so now I'm faced, again, this young liberal guy from Tel Aviv, a very not religious city, very liberal, wanting to photograph these 16 families, all of them religious Jews, living on a beach with a very different lifestyle. Every time that they get out, they just speak outside their house, there's 5 cameras of Getty Images, Reuters, AP, AFP, everybody's just like photographing them because magazines around the world are really looking for imagery from Gush Katif. So they're not very friendly with photography at that point. And here I need to go and photograph them. What do you do? Now, this is where I get to a very important issue in the documentary project, which is access. Access can really make or break your project. If you have it, that's amazing. If you don't have it, don't even start. And there's the access is basically crossing barriers. We have bureaucratical barriers and we have psychological barriers. So here was a situation that the psychological barriers came before the bureaucratical one. When Gush Katif was sealed to the public or the disengagement started to occur, then my press ID and my connections were very valuable in terms of the bureaucratical barriers. I knew already the soldiers, I knew all the entry points, so I knew how to go around everything that I needed to go around. But here I am, about 3-4 months before those guys are evacuated, and I want to photograph them and get intimate with them at the most hard period of their lives. So we have a huge psychological barrier. What do you do? Well, you sometimes have to be very, very creative, and this really called for a very creative situation or resolution. What happened was that was the time of the Israeli Independence and Memorial Day, which happens actually next week. So basically, it's exactly 8 years ago. Wow. Yeah, exactly 8 years ago. We kind of go from extreme sadness to extreme joy. It's the most bipolar experience in Israel that you can get. So I decided to photograph those days very, very intensively, and I did. This is, for instance, on Memorial Day preparation for Independence Day, and this was the memorial ceremony in the small center of the village. That's the next day, Independence Day on the beach. There were a lot of people coming to support the settlers, hoping that they will not be evacuated. And what you see in the back, by the way, are those caravans that I mentioned before. This is the distances that we were talking about. People, even soldiers, were a little bit more relaxed on the beach. And what I did then, I basically selected 20 pictures, 20 favorite pictures. I printed 20 copies of 5x7 of each and every picture, and then bounded them into 20 booklets of 20 pictures, entitled them Shirat Hayam, Independence Day, Memorial Day 2005. I took those booklets and I started knocking on the doors. When they would open, I would present myself and I would hand them the present, saying what I really believe, that I love the pictures being on my computer, but it's much more valuable in the hands of the people that will need them, especially if the evacuation would actually take place. And we didn't know at that point if the evacuation will take place. Everybody was talking about it, but we really didn't know. So you give a present, and that started a conversation. You know, at least have a glass of water, tell us a little bit more about you. So I presented the project. I told them what I wanted to do. I told them why I wanted to do it and answered their question. And then I just told them, you know, I'm going to be around. If you guys have any questions for me, you know, please do. If you guys want to cooperate in that, I would really appreciate it. And if you guys don't, then I'll appreciate it as well. But the main thing there was to show a lot of respect to who they are and a lot of sensitivity to their situation. Not only that, also to expose myself and allow them to start the dialogue the other way. And this is how it started. It started actually very fast. And in about a couple of days, everybody, who's this crazy tall photographer that gave those great pictures to everybody, because they really liked the pictures. And I was really happy about it. And slowly they stopped me, started asking questions and inviting me for lunch. And before I knew it, I was becoming much more of a friend. This was also, for instance, if you would go a little bit north or south from the settlement, this is the Arab population fishing in this time. And the longer I stayed there, the more I invested in it, the closer we got. And before I knew it, I was already part of the settlement.
Where did you stay?
With them. I was invited into their houses. Well, in the beginning, I wasn't actually. I would have to drive 1.5 hours south, 1.5 hours backwards. You know, I would have to not work 2 or 3 days a week at least. You know, when I wanted to photograph them, I couldn't work. So you really have to invest a lot of things. I will talk about it at the end, but here we go, investing time, investing money, and I also did a couple of accidents, because sometimes I would leave the settlement too late, and I wouldn't be too sharp going back. So there was a lot of prices to pay, but I just couldn't help doing it. You know, that was the situation. Now, before showing you how this evolved, I want to talk about something that we kind of skipped. It's the actual idea. Okay, I told you that I knew that I wanted to do a project. And we talked right now about the prices. it's very important that you select the right idea for a documentary project. It's a commitment. So if you chose the wrong idea, then that's a pity, because you're going to investing in the wrong thing and just throwing it to the garbage. And we talk about this in the documentary class. What is a good idea? Eventually, it all boils down to two very, very simple things. One, that it's really interesting to you to work on this. You know, you just can't help doing it in some cases, because otherwise you would just quit. It's going to be too hard. There's so many ups and downs, and especially downs. If you're not totally devoted to it and have to photograph it, you're going to quit. The second one is that it's also interesting for the general public, because if you did this most amazing project that was fascinating to you, but nobody want to hear about, oops, very basic. And trust me, it sounds stupid, but it's not. All those guys in the class that come are always faced with those two criteria, and they have to fight it. It's not easy. So here, I was invested body, soul, money, any way possible. I just had to do this project. And I continued doing it. Now, also in terms of research, every documentary project usually involves a lot of research. And you cannot even, I cannot even start to describe how much you need to invest in this. In this case, for instance, we talked about me taking my friend going to Shirat Hayam just to see what it's about. So there was collaboration with other reporters, other colleagues, photographers that also continued throughout the period of time when I was doing this project. There was a lot of footwork, just going around photographing. We're talking about over 7 months of preparations, even before I really felt that I was starting the project. Reading documents on the web, talking to other reporters. There's a lot of research that has to be done. Some projects are smaller, and thank God you can do a little bit less research, but if you need to, don't stop. And it continues to happen. This was the synagogue, by the way, in the settlement, also a caravan. Now, as the months moved over, the situation became more and more tense, and it kind of looked that the evacuation is actually going to take place. This is a few days before, as they're already preparing for a blockade of that whole area. So they took one of those destroyed houses and stocked all kind of food. And this is on 17th of August, 2005. It's one day before the evacuation. This is the main family, the mother and two daughters of the main family, Picard family, that I stayed with. At that time, they already knew that they were going to be evacuated. On the 17th of August, Israel already evacuated on one day 7 settlements. So everybody understood that this is a reality, and probably we're going to be next. So she took her daughters and just went to a separation ceremony from the sea. They lived there for about 5 years, and they vowed never to go back to a sea. They took a vow, which to the best of my knowledge, they never did. Now, before going in, modesty, as you know, is an extremely important thing in Judaism, in Islam, in a lot of religions. But 3 women going with their clothes into the water can be looked as very indecent by some people. So their husbands, all 3 are married. Well, then 2 and 1 fiancé asked me not to photograph this because, you know, they were afraid that this will be not modest. So I promised them that I will be careful, and I will not wait until it might actually be like that. And they saw this picture, and they cherish it. This is the last night, also with Picard, with Hannah and her husband, as we were, preparing. And then came the next morning. And this is the entrance to the settlement, which was very heavily barricaded. And this is on the road leading to the settlement itself. They also placed some road barricades. Everybody knew that the army will come, and there was a very big question, in terms of the opposition. Should they try to deny the evacuation aggressively or quietly, peacefully? Eventually, in most settlements, it actually went much more peaceful than everybody thought. And in Shirat Hayam as well, which was, Shirat Hayam was considered by the army as maybe one of the most militant ones. But eventually, nothing in terms of aggressiveness happened there. It was a very emotional day. This is inside, just next to the wall. This is what happens on the other side of the wall. This is Picard's family, one of the sons. There was already the army surrounding the whole settlements, waiting for the evacuation, and then the evacuation started. So here I am, after 3.5 months of photographing these people inside and out and becoming their friend. I'm the only person even allowed into those houses as a photographer. Before, actually, on the night before, they met together. And of course, I didn't take part in it, but I came at one point and I said, like, guys, I know that everybody knows what's going to happen in the next few days. And thank you very much for respecting me and allowing me to be part of the settlement and photograph this for the last 3.5 months. Tomorrow is a little bit different. So if anybody doesn't want their picture taken, please let me know now, and I'll respect that. What I was amazed that almost everybody asked for their picture to be taken. You know, they said, like, we don't want you to ask questions. This is important that people will know. And this was with Picard family, and here I am with them. They asked to have their last lunch, which was a totally ordeal. Everybody's crying here. The family, the soldiers, and myself. I was crying my mind off photographing, and regardless of my political opinions, which were not part of this project, I did not try to make a political statement. It was more a human statement about what was going on and trying to bring people together. I don't remember crying as much, ever. So it was a very, very emotional day. And even those that were fortified in a very basic way. I came a few days later for the last time, stepped into the settlement. Most of the caravans were already gone. I took my last pictures and I left. And it was emotional. As you see, like 8 years later, I'm talking about this and I'm still kind of, it touches me. Now, this is how it should be. You know, if you're doing a good project and you're really connected to it, 8 years later, it should still touch you. And hopefully some other people that you're showing them to. This is the kind of level and commitment you have to go into. It just doesn't work otherwise. Now, as you can see here, access was the key thing. And we're going to continue talking about this. Have a question? No? No. All right. While I was working with this amazing, yes?
Were you interested in photographing the Palestinians moving in, or was that too dangerous?
Okay, and the question was if I was interested in photographing the Palestinians moving in, or if that was too dangerous. That was crazy dangerous. I could photograph it, but those cameras would never see the daylight because I would not be able to leave. Yeah. And regardless of that, I didn't feel it was necessary. I was doing a project about the voyage of those people, not about the Palestinians and what they had to do. If I would photograph it, it would be totally different for magazines or newspaper editorial work. I did continue to photograph two other settlements that were evacuated, one called Katif and one called Homesh, which pictures of you're going to see very soon. But what happened to me was also, you know, every project that you do like this affects you. And I told you that I just spent 3.5 months at least with people that were from a totally different background than mine, religiously mainly. And at that time and also afterwards, I started looking at my archive and I noticed that I'm photographing so much at religious ceremonies and political events that there was some kind of thread connecting all those pictures. I thought about it a little bit and then I understood that I was fascinated by belief, and especially the power of belief, about how in some cases it can, well, first of all, it gives us amazing things as it belongs to a community, answers for our questions in life, a sense of tradition. But on the other hand, it also sometimes pushes people to extreme situations, and sometimes even fanaticism. We can see it across the board. And I'm not talking necessarily about religious belief. It can be political belief, lifestyle, any kind of choice that you do in life. So I looked at my archive, I selected the ones that I felt worked together, and I started working on this project in an organized fashion. This is a series that, well, while Shirat Hayam was with the preparation, it took a little bit less than a year, but hardcore photographing was about 4 months. This series I photographed across 5 years. Now, most documentary projects, being a series or something that is more narrative-based, like Shirat Hayam, usually will span across a lot of time. If you get to finish a project within a few weeks, that's one of the shortest projects I've ever seen in my life. It can be done, but it's extremely hard. Most projects will be months or years, sometimes even lifetimes. So again, choose wisely when you're heading out to that project, but also allow yourself some kind of flexibility as you're going along, because you're going to learn more about your projects. And this is also kind of what happened to me with belief. I was learning as I was going and slowly collecting pictures into the series. This was photographed 6 months after the disengagement, which I just showed you. What you see here is a group, it's the army entering a West Bank settlement called Amona. There were 9 illegal buildings that the Israeli Supreme Court ordered to be destructed. And when the army came to perform that destruction, they were faced by over 4,000 young Jewish settlers that came there to make a point. They came there to make a point that they will not be evacuated again. And they did. This is the entry point to the settlement. This is where the first contact, which was an extremely intense day. It continued with about 200 people being injured on both sides until those buildings were eventually destroyed. And it kind of left a scar in the current history of Israel. This was in the Holy Sepulchre Church 2 years later, during Good Friday. There's thousands of pilgrims moving moving in the last path of Jesus and eventually arriving at the Holy Sepulchre Church, touching this stone that is believed, according to the tradition, that is where Jesus was taken down from the cross and cleaned. That was on the same day, again. Now, in this series, which deals with belief, I try to, there's all kinds of influences. And this I want to talk in terms of the strategy that you choose to work on a project or a series. It's not necessarily very obvious. In the first one, we saw more of an in-depth going into the lives of one settlement. There's very different strategies to tell a story. You just have to try to see which one might be more effective. In this case, we have a selection of pictures, arbitrarily so-called, from different locations. Working on belief, it was very important for me that there would be a very strong visual content to the picture, and actually also relating to the history of art, specifically religious art, as for instance we have in this picture, or in others that you're going to see afterwards. So light, composition, color are extremely important in this case. It's not only that, some of the pictures are much stronger in terms of their volume, as I call it that are much more energetic, sometimes even cinematographic, or at least this is what I try to do, and some are a little bit more quiet. In this case, for instance, Israel's authorities sometimes prevent young people, people under the age of 45, Arabs, to go into the old city of Jerusalem to take part in Ramadan prayers, out of a fear of some conflicts taking place. So those young people just pray wherever they can. In a way, it's also a political statement, and this is just outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. This is Purim. Purim, the Israeli Halloween, if you can call it that. The kids dress up with costumes, and for the older population, the men, it's obligatory to get drunk, really drunk. It's actually obligatory to go as drunk as you cannot remember your name. This is what the book says. Purim, yeah. Now, people don't want to embarrass themselves, embarrass others, or hurt everybody, right? So a lot of people would actually gather around. This is in a synagogue, and they would spend the night together because they would know that, in terms of they can understand it, they can celebrate it, and then they know that nobody's getting hurt in this way. I was very fortunate to actually be allowed in this situation because, as you can imagine, I'm not necessarily part of this crowd, but and this is what I'm going to go now to one of the main points, which is called respect. There's a very, very strong connection between these two pictures. This was taken when I was working on a different project, the fifth one that I hope to share with you, if we're going to have time. It's called 18. I was waiting for one of my subjects in a very militant Arab city called Al-Fahim, or at least considered to be very militant by the Jewish population. So I was waiting for her, and suddenly I hear the muazzin calling for Friday prayer. So I grabbed the guy that was with me, and we went to the mosque and asked for permission to go in. Now, as you can imagine, it's very hard to mistake me as an Arab person. But I wasn't hiding, it was more about, yes, I'm Jewish from Israel, and I would really appreciate if you could allow me in. And they did. In a way, a little bit to my surprise, and even more to the surprise of the guy that was me, an Arab person that was connecting me. They only asked for me to be respectful. Now, imagine a triangle between you as a photographer, the subject that you're photographing, and your audience. I always try to keep respect on all sides, because if you don't respect your subject, chances are that you're going to produce a picture that will also not respect your viewer. And if you don't respect your viewer, trust me, your viewer will not respect you. It's a temptation sometimes to take advantage of somebody's situation, and it's a very easy thing to do. It's also a very destructive thing to do, not only to your subject, to yourselves. So for me, being respectful and as somebody that works a lot with people and photographs people, that is for me one of the basic ethical points or things that I try to embody. Now, photographing a Muslim prayer is extremely hard. If you photograph in front of them, they're basically praying to you, which is not very respectful, right? If you're photographing from behind, you're photographing their behinds, which is even less respectful. From the sides, you can try it, you're photographers. It usually doesn't make a very good picture unless you have a really interesting figure there at some point. So I felt really lucky to be able to get into a mosque that they actually had 3 stories up and go all the way up and photograph in this way. I sent the picture to that girl that I was photographing, and a few months later when I was coming back to the city to pay her another visit, somebody like, hey, you're the tall photographer from the picture from the mosque. Good job. So suddenly I became everybody's friend. Now, I try to look here both, and you can see, first of all, at the public. How does this affect the public? And we see here, for instance, a big sense of community. This is a group of evangelic priests that just finished baptizing a group of 600 pilgrims in the waters of the Jordan River. Afterward, they wanted to be baptized, but they're the one doing the baptism. So they formed this circular formation, in which after saying the prayer, they all went into the water, and it was pretty beautiful to watch. So I'm very interested in all the public, but also at individuals within that public. And how, you know, what mental space they are, what are their action, what are they doing. For example, this is a group of Ethiopian pilgrims in one of the churches very close to the Holy Sepulchre Church. And this is in Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer, which we're going to see another picture very soon of it. I'll tell the story later, but in the morning we have a prayer of about 500,000, most of them ultra-Orthodox Jews. And here again, I was allowed into the women's quarters, which was highly irregular, and allowed to photograph them. Now, for the younger women, it's believed that if they pray very passionately on that day, next to the tomb of, there's a very important tomb there on a mountain called Mount Meron, they're going to have a better chance of finding a good husband and having many children. So I hope it succeeded. This is Hebron. Hebron is a city which is very important both for the Jews and the Arabs. We have 400 religious extremist Jews living among 40,000 Palestinians. It's a constant point of conflict, and whenever the Jews want to walk through the Arab parts of the city, they actually have to be escorted by the Israeli military, just making sure that they're going to make it back. So this was on Sukkot. We were walking through. Again, sometimes I'm turning up the volume, turning down the volume. We talked about the evacuations. So that was the 23rd of August, 2005. It was the evacuation of the settlement called Homesh. And in this case, there was a group of 3 young settlers that were fortified on the rooftop. It was a very hot summer day in Israel, over 100 degrees. So by the time that the army actually got to that roof, they were already totally dehydrated, and the army takes them down. When this was printed and enlarged about 15 feet by 10 feet in the Tel Aviv Museum in a big exhibition, it was interesting to see how people reacted to this from both parts, because obviously it shows the suffering of the young Jewish settlers, but it also portrays them with somebody they don't really believe in. In both cases, mortars, if you can, mortar, sorry. This was a few hours later, about a couple of hours later. This young Jewish settler was evacuated from that house unwillingly, so she was handcuffed. And while was taken down from the ladder, she half fell, half jumped, just to be held by those 2 soldiers until somebody grabbed her from the ground and pulled her down. And this is Kaparot, in the more Orthodox neighborhood in Jerusalem. Before the Day of Atonement, we believe on the Day of Atonement that God writes your name in the book of life or book of death. So it's a very important day for the Jews. Before that, people are asking for forgiveness and trying to redeem their sins. And one of the tradition that has developed during the last few centuries is kaparot, which basically means you take a hen for a woman or a rooster for a man, and you swirl it over your heads 3 times, saying a specific verse. believing that all of your sins are then transmitted into the chicken, which is then slaughtered instead of you. This is also part of what you're saying. And I was always fascinated by this ceremony and how it affected both the culture and how it became part of the culture. There's also a lot of criticism within the ultra-Orthodox sect, but not only, also by animal rights organizations. You can also donate money to the poor instead, for example. This is one of my favorite pictures in the series. Any guess if she's Jewish, Muslim, or Christian? If you're hesitating, that's great, because that is why it's my favorite, one of my favorite pictures in the series. The fact that we can't actually know the difference is a little bit of food for thought. She's Christian, actually, not Jewish. This is the Holy Sepulchre Church, and the bar that you see here is part of the tomb of Jesus. On that specific day, Good Friday, they open a hatch at the top of the church, and if it's a sunny day, there's a light beam that goes exactly and falls on the tomb of Jesus. Now that beam of sunlight is considered to be very important and everybody wants to go inside that beam. So she's a pilgrim from Eastern Europe, which was praying inside, and everybody is just reaching for it because there's a big crowd. They're just trying to touch it. We talked about Lag BaOmer, so I promised you a story. So this is those women praying very passionately, remember? So this is a few hours before that, during the night. On Lag BaOmer, which will happen in about 3 weeks' time, over 500,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews gathered from all around the world. Some of them I'm believing also from here. And they gather on Mount Meron, which has the tomb of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's a very sacred grounds. And they celebrate there throughout the night in a lot of prayers and actual dancing and partying, staying there. Sometimes, imagine a rave of ultra-Orthodox Jews. I cannot just describe it any better. This is a rave of ultra-Orthodox Jews. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. And this is, now they also have huge fires that are there to commemorate a rebellion that was in 163 BC. AD, sorry. So these people are looking at the main fire of their court. This is the Holy Sepulchre Church, the entrance to the church. And sometimes the gods of photography are very nice to you. And they kind of try to arrange everything. All you have to do is just pick up your camera and snap a few pictures. So I was there. I chose those spots. This is the entrance. I chose it because of the light, which was very appealing to me. And there was a lot of people coming in and coming out. And suddenly when they actually cleared out, I looked at those two people that were totally unaware of each other's presence. I looked at them for about 30 seconds, knowing that I have to be very, very fast about what I'm doing. I managed to take up the camera, a couple of pictures. One is this one, and the other one she already turned away. So a little bit of technical, or just to think in terms of what you guys have to, how can you prepare better? So first of all, it's the lens selection that you're using. You know, we kind of saw here a mix of both. But when you're working on a documentary project, usually you would go for the wider selection or wider range of focal lengths. Normal to, yes?
The card didn't say anything?
On the contrary. Now, in terms of also cultural, we're going to talk about cultural differences, but there's a very big difference between the US and Israel in terms of how you can photograph a picture, okay? Here when you take a picture, everybody's like, why do you take a picture? What are you going to do with it, right?
Yeah.
Don't take the picture, no. In Israel, why don't you take a picture? Am I not interesting enough? Very big difference. So nobody in Israel would assume that you're going to do anything bad with a picture. It's one of the most heavily photographed places on earth. No? So do whatever you want with it. If they know that they're doing something bad, then they would talk to you about it. But on a regular basis, no. Here, for some reason, there's a sense of paranoia. And which sometimes I actually enjoyed scaring people a little bit more, just to make them think about why you just even scared. In this case, no, it was okay, another guy taking a picture. So lens selection. If you have a telephoto lens in this case, you will not be able to take the picture. I prefer getting much closer, and it also gives you much more stability in terms of telephoto lens. It's sharper in terms of depth of field that you can actually use. So definitely, I prefer to use wider lenses in this case. Not necessarily go ultra wide. Yeah, some people when they go wide, they go 12. No, not that wide. I specifically use 1635 2470 millimeters in terms of lenses, and also 70-200 for my job as a journalist, but I usually try to stay within the 2470. This is the most comfortable range that I feel in. One thing that happens though, if you are working in a wider angle, you really have to mind the edges, and what happens, you have to composite much better, because you cannot crop the reality as you can do with a telephoto lens. Telephoto lens I would use to photograph some areas that I just cannot get closer, and we saw a couple of examples of those. These two verticals, both of them are taken with telephoto lens. I was not on the top of this building, and I could not even get near that lady at that time. But otherwise, pretty wide lens. Okay. One thing that we talked here is about speed. Okay. You have to react quick, right? Otherwise, you're not going to get the picture. So there's a few things that you guys have to keep in mind. It's both the speed of your reaction, that once you have to pick up your camera, you want it to react fast. So choose cameras that don't take a couple of seconds until they actually take the picture. But it's also not only about that, it's having the camera set in a certain way that you already know that it's going to take a good picture. I, for instance, have my camera, in the bag, set at exactly the same configuration. So I just pull it out, and if I don't do anything, I know how it shoots. It's going to shoot on 1:160, 400 ISO, and the aperture is going to set itself. Why? Because at 1:160, I'm probably going to, motion-wise, I'm going to probably be okay. Okay, and 400 just gives me an ISO, give me kind of it prepares for most situations, and if I want to change it, I'll change it. Now, you don't only have to think of your speed of reaction, you also have to think about the speed of your subjects, and the faster they move, the faster you have to set the shutter. And not only that, you also have to think about your personal stability. Okay, so in some situations, it's more how you keep stable, right? But not only that. I'll tell you a story, for example. When I moved into photography, I was working with Ziv Koren, which is one of the most important photojournalists in Israel in the last 20 years. I highly advise that you try Google him, Ziv Koren. Ziv became famous because of a lot of images he done at Israeli terrorist attacks in explosions of various buses. And I remember first time after working with him a few months, there was a terrorist attack in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and I dashed over and I photographed, and I came back to the office very excited. I sit down next to my computer and we start uploading the picture. He tells me, "Is this your first terrorist attack?" Yeah, it's a kind of a weird question to ask, but Israel. So like, yeah. So like, well, don't be frustrated if over 90% of your pictures are going to be blurry. And I'm like, come on, I'm a good photographer. And he says, no, over 90% of your pictures is probably going to be blurry, but that's fine for the first time. And I went, okay. I thought that he was bullshitting, but then I put up the pictures, and 90% of the pictures are blurry. So I was like, how do you know, Ziv? So like, you probably photographed at 1:125, something that you thought was sharp. So like, yeah. So like, you were so full of adrenaline, you were shaking as crazy. This is just normally what happens and you were running from one place to that. This is what happens as a photojournalist. You have to set up your speed faster, not because of what's happening, because that you are in a situation that will not manage the camera shake that well. So try to think of that as well. If you are running, if you're doing something, to get to a situation, set it up. Yes?
Do you carry multiple cameras on your person, or just one camera to change lens?
The question was if I'm carrying multiple cameras and just keep the lenses on them, or if I carry one camera and exchange lenses. Both. I have multiple cameras. I have 3 bodies. Usually, if I'm going to, if I'm going to doing just a journalistic work and I want to react faster, I will take 2 bodies on me, one with a telephoto, one with a wider angle, and then a set of pouches in them, the rest of my lenses. If I want to be a little bit more not as aggressive with my presence, I would take 1 camera and extra pouches, and then 1 extra pouch for another lens, and I will just exchange it a little bit slower. So if the speed of reaction is extremely critical, 2 cameras. If being more subtle about what you're doing, not scaring people, 1 camera.
Thank you.
Sure. Think also of the artificial light that is available for you. In my street photography class, I always try to get the students either at nighttime to Times Square, or we're going to go to Grand Central to kind of be in a situation that we don't have light. What do you do then? You get creative. You look at what light is available to you and you use it wisely. If you don't, you don't. And sometimes you also have to use flash. Now, flash can either be used to overcome some problems, like a fill-in flash, or if there's some area that is totally dark in the picture and you try to, well, basically that's fill-in flash as well. But sometimes it also can use as a very valuable tool in terms of your personal vision, personal voices as photographers. So if you do develop that ability, that might be nice, but then you also have to think about having a mobile lighting kit in terms of transmitters or cables. Using an on-camera flash is not necessarily the best thing to do in terms of your creativity as photographers. It's not the best light ever. So try to investigate a lot about that. ICP has great classes about this, but not only ICP. Teach yourself how to actually photograph creatively with light. Mount Meron, remember, like Ba'omer? I really like that that ceremony. If you do have a chance to visit Israel around April, that's the time to go. Make sure not to miss it. This is part also of that same morning prayer 4 years later. And we talked about Shirat Hayam, so very few pictures from that project was actually also included in this project. There was a group of 300 settlers that came to support the settlers on Shirat Hayam, and they just formed all those huts on the beach and lived in almost nothing. This is a woman during the evening prayer. And again, you know, as I said, turning up the volume, turning down the volume, and we're going to talk about it also when we're going to talk about sequencing. This is the evacuation of Homesh again. That settlement that you saw the guy taking down from the roof, or the girl with the handcuffs. This was on the morning of that day. Now, some of you also might wonder how many pictures are taken in each and every situation like that, right? God forbid we have these cameras that now can photograph very fast. Okay, and a lot of times when you're going to go out in the street, or even when you are next to journalists, sometimes you just hear the motor running insanely. It's not a good thing. It's really not a good thing. You're doing that because you're hoping that one of those pictures is going to catch the exact moment, right? The problem is that you're not selecting your pictures anymore. You know, you're hoping that the camera will select your pictures. And you know, there's a saying in Hebrew that even a blind chicken sometimes can get a few grains. But it doesn't make you better photographers. It makes you blinder photographers. So don't use that. In this case, why am I giving this as an example? Because in this case, I actually photographed, I think, about 30 frames. And that's a lot for me. Why? Because the light is extremely unstable, and I wanted to get a certain composition, so I had to try again and again and again and again. I didn't even look at that screen. It was more afterwards, like, okay, if I didn't take it in 30 frames, I'm not a good enough of a photographer, and this picture should not exist. Yeah. There were 3 options eventually out of those 30. 27 went to the garbage just because of the flames. But there were 3 options. In most cases, try to be much more selective about how much you're photographing. Now, I photographed a lot in Israel, but I also photographed outside of Israel. A few projects, one in Cambodia about the healthcare situation of children. I did a project about Burning Man here in Nevada. But in 2008, after doing a project in Israel about the African refugees in Israel, I was invited to exhibit that project in Medellin, in Colombia, in the Museo de Antioquia. And when I went there to take part in that exhibition, I started understanding the situation there with the displaced people. Over 10% of the population of Colombia is displaced because of ongoing fights between the paramilitary groups, the army, and the guerrilla. Over 10% of the population, people. This is the country with the highest rate of displaced people, internally displaced people in the world. It's become kind of a situation that everybody already acknowledges and sees it as part of the population. Now, remember what I told you that happens if I come across a group of people that I really don't understand? It happened again, and I care about it. It's not understand, but I also care about. So I decided to do a project. Now, in this case, again, access is a very, very big difference. Because, well, there's a few things, reason I brought this project up, but access in this case is critical. First of all, because you're going into places of people that are in very tough situations. They see you as the foreigner. You know, there's no reason for them to actually take part in this project. I could not, again, photograph 20 pictures and give them as a booklet. It was also, you know, I would like to do things one time. That was my story with Shirat Hayam. I enjoyed that. I didn't want to do it again. So here I had to get the access in a different way. It's not only that. If for those of you who have been to Colombia, you would find it extremely hard to communicate with the people if you only know English. Very hard. So a couple of things happened. When I was there doing the exhibition, I was giving some lectures and workshops. So I was very lucky to be able to, when I was doing those presentations, there was a convention there of all kinds of help organizations for displaced people. So I showed them pictures that I've taken during the last 4 days after I did my lecture about my previous work. And I said, like, you're just looking at my next project. So if you want to be part of it, I would really appreciate your help. And a few people approached. And those people actually made the project. Without them, you would not be seeing the pictures. There was a social worker that opened all of Medellin and Bogota for me. There was a woman afterwards that connected me with the church in an area which is controlled by the guerrilla. Why the church? Any ideas? If you want to go into a guerrilla area, being a photographer, chances are you're not going to come back. So you have to go undercover somewhere. So I was a member of the church for that part. And I had to pay quite a bit of money to be a member of the church, not because they asked it for the church. There's other ways of asking it. They would ask me for to pay for the people that operated the boats and for the fuel. Insane amounts of money for fuel and the boat. The members on the boat were also their family. But the thing was, I understood that, but I was actually paying for my safety. Because if anybody else would mention to anybody that I'm a foreigner photographing there, I would be kidnapped for sure. And not only that, at one point we were stopped by a boat of the Colombian army that, had they known who I am, they would never let us cross into this danger zone. So suddenly I became this person from Romania that forgot his passport in the hotel, and I'm a missionary. And I look at the padre, and he's looking at me, saying, it's not good to lie, but if it saves your life, maybe it's smart. So that was one area of, this is what I call fixers, or not I call fixers. This is the term that is used across the board in the documentary and journalistic world. Fixers are people that you should not think that you know everything about everywhere you go. There's people that live there, speak the language, know the area. They're going to lead you to the places that you need to go. They're going to open the doors for you. They're going to be the middleman. And those middlemen sometimes are worth their weight in gold. Sometimes they cost money, like my church. Sometimes they don't, because the social worker did not want to get paid. It was important for her that the story be told. She asked me to pay the people that were our local fixer in each and every neighborhood. In this way, also supporting the displaced people themselves, which I really liked. So the other element was language, right? So I had to learn Spanish, because the first time I was going around and hating myself, so nobody can actually wanting to talk to me. I spent the next 3-4 months in New York having a private teacher and trying to learn as much Spanish as I could. And then I went to Colombia, and within 1 week I could actually manage myself a little bit. Now, they knew that I was not amazing in Spanish, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I tried. And once I get into the house and there's basic communication, then okay, we're gonna fix everything. And the whole communication was totally different. This woman lost her husband, where is it? In this place. A few years earlier. He was the leader of a village, and he was sitting on this bench when the guerrilla came into this house and just shot him dead in front of her and her children, forcing them to be displaced from their house. So now she lives away, and she has 2 babies, and the other ones are taken care in Venezuela. This is actually one of those villages with a guerrilla. It was also caused by flooding. It was hurt by flooding, so there's a lot of things that can hurt them there. Very many things. This is one of the 52 neighborhoods of displaced people in Medellin alone. Altos de la Virgen. Now, there's a lot of preparation going into a project like that. If you're photographing around your personal habitat, it's easier. But if you're flying to Colombia, you better get organized about, and there's a lot of pre-production involved. Even in terms of hotels, flights, the fixers that you're going to be working with, transportation. There's a lot of things that you have to think about and prepare in advance. So either you do it yourself or you hire a producer if it gets extremely complicated. In this case, I was able to manage it myself. But you also have to take those things into consideration. All right? This is also in Medellin. And a place called Moravia, which is right outside along the main river there. It's a dumpster, basically. It was a dumpster that was converted into a displaced people neighborhood, and they're now looking for scrap to do recycling and earn a little bit of money. This we saw already, also in a guerrilla area. Now, it's all about the fixes that you have. And those fixers just allow me into a very intimate situation with people that would feel totally comfortable saying, okay, this guy is good. He's going to photograph you, and we wanted to photograph you. So people were really communicating and opening up extremely, extremely fast. We're talking again about the wife that lost the husband. In Choco. Very different life form. It was extremely hard talking with her. Now again, I'm talking about visual strategy in this case. So my strategy here was to do profiles of various families. I photographed over 20 families in different locations, each which I would interview a little bit. And then I would just photograph around their house. I would also do a portrait like we saw the one in the beginning, and you're going to see another one later. And then when I was photographing the house, I tried to really take care of, or to be very considerative of the spaces, giving, understanding at least that the spaces were actually the whole thing that they were displaced from or to. This is a young couple that, pretty crazy story. He didn't want to join the paramilitary groups. So they offered him basically either you're going to join us or you're going to run for your life, and he had to run for his life with his pregnant wife, sorry. And now they lived with his brother. It was very interesting to see what they have on the walls, either religious objects or very militant pictures in most cases. Again, kind of testifying to the crowd. This is a kindergarten kitchen in one of the neighborhoods in Medellin. Now, coming to photograph from Israel and Colombia, two very different places of conflict, was pretty interesting. In a way, it was easier in Israel because in Israel you know who's your enemy. You know if you're getting into a complicated situation, and you kind of know how to get out of. In Colombia, you don't know who's the enemy. Like the person talking to you might be a member of the paramilitary groups. And I remember one case I was in, again, how important your fixtures are. We were photographing in Ciudad Bolivar, which is outside Bogota. And suddenly the people didn't want to talk to us anymore. Like we went to a house, they started talking to us, and then the next house, nobody wants to talk to us anymore. So we said, okay, we didn't know what happened, so let's take the bus. And as we're waiting for the bus, my fixer comes to me and said like quietly, Nathan, don't look, but when the bus comes, jump on the bus as fast as you can. And I'm like, okay. I jump on the bus, and the bus just, and he shouts something in Spanish to the bus driver, and the bus driver just takes off insanely. And behind us was three guys with machine guns running after us. Apparently they saw the cameras and they wanted them, or more than that. And this is also why nobody talked to us anymore, because the paramilitary groups passed an order. Nobody talks to the guy. This was in Pereira. The people that are displaced, they have to basically try to find any kind of alternative housing situation. So they take very, very cheap areas, or some that nobody actually uses, and they build houses with whatever they have, whatever wood or tarps or everything that they can find, and be supported mostly by those communities themselves that have experienced the same thing. They have hardly any assistance from the government. The schooling or even water or electricity there is extremely problematic. It's kind of weird because it's the same government that causes this. They don't take ownership for that. It causes a lot of malnutrition or diseases within those areas because of water which is contaminated. This is Moravia, as we talked about, of people trying to make money through recycling, but would you go live in a dumpster on a regular basis? Obviously the answer is not, and this is part of what they have to go through. Or this family that kind of produced a small factory for arepas, the Colombian bread, in their small house, in the basement of their house. And they were frightened that I would be somehow giving these pictures to the wrong person, and then they're going to be deprived of their livelihood. Again, your fixer can go a long way. Now in this case, we were at, this is again one of the neighborhoods in Medellin, and my fixer was just going crazy here, just saying, we have to go, we have to go. And I was like, okay, what is the rush? So like the night is falling, and then when the night is falling, this is when the guerrilla and paramilitary groups go outside. Like all this area is controlled by these people, and once you're out, that's it. They are with the guns in the street. So we cannot be found here because we're going to be found dead.
Is that FARC?
What? Yeah. There's a couple of them, but this specific area was the FARC. Now, in the cities, it's mostly the paramilitary groups, not the FARC. The FARC are in the rural places, just because it's a little bit harder. But this neighborhood still, even the displaced people are still abused by the paramilitary groups, using those areas for narco traffic. Yeah.
What kind of traffic?
Narco traffic. Colombia is the biggest producer of cocaine in the world. Yeah. And this was the last family I photographed. Even a crazier story. The son of this woman decided one day that he wants to join the guerrilla. So he joined the guerrilla, and then his family was very angry for that, so he told them that he wants to quit. They just explained to him that there is no way to quit after you join. Oh, sorry. They asked him, before that, they asked him to kill his best friend in order to show his allegiance and to prove that he wants to be with the guerrilla. So obviously he didn't want to kill his best friend to prove that. So he said, okay, next day they came and they killed him and his father to show everybody that when the guerrilla says something, you do it. Immediately after that, the family had to flee for their lives. The only reason that they were saved because they were in the fields. So they had to flee for their lives. This is the third place that they found because they're still being hunted down. And this is in their basement. Questions so far, guys? Nothing? Yeah.
Between your project in Israel and your project in Colombia, I saw a major leap in just your technique. How do you think you've evolved over maybe between the
Well, there was a few. The question was that the gentleman there saw a major leap between the Belief or Shirat Hayam project and the Displaced project. There were a couple of projects in between that I didn't show you. One which was in Cambodia about the healthcare situation for children. Another one called Shelter, which is about the African refugees in Israel. First of all, I think that you develop as a photographer along the years. And one of the best things that you can feel is if you look back at the pictures from 2 years ago and you're asking yourself, who's the photographer that photographed these crappy pictures? That's one of the best things that can happen to you. That means you're in a different place. So I evolved as a photographer, but also as a person. I started being more involved in documentary projects, and I started getting much closer to my subjects. Because, you know, the Belief series, I hardly knew anybody that I was photographing. In Shirat Hayam, I was part of them, but it was in a different situation, and I tried actually to pull back in order to, when I was showing it, not to take sides. It was very critical to me that my audience would not know if I'm pro or anti the disengagement, so both sides from both would be able to contemplate over whatever is being shown there. In this case, I wanted to get closer. And again, you're looking at three very different photographic strategies. The thing was that I was conscious about those photographic strategies. And as you go along and become a more sophisticated photographer, hopefully, you're doing better choices as well. And trust me, if you think that this was a leap, wait until you see the next one. This is the big leap. Now, before we actually go to the next one, which is going to be a little bit of a different thing, it's the first project I photographed in Israel, in New York, sorry. I want to talk a little bit about how you should work while you're in the field. Okay, because we talked already about the idea, about researching the idea, about the preparation, about building contacts, about gaining access, about everything that you have to invest, right? Now you're there photographing, so what do? We talked a little bit about the technical parts, but a little bit more about how you handle yourself. So a few advices, what to do and what not to do. But I think that the most common phrase is a fly on the wall. You know, try to be a fly on the wall, which means try to go as unnoticeably as possible. In some cases, it's really easy, you know, especially if you're not 6'5", then maybe you have a better chance of being not noticed. If you're 6'5", I have a little bit of a different strategy. I go as hard as I can. Why? Because people will notice me, so I do want them to notice me and to get used to me as fast as possible. Once they get used to me, then the real fun starts. But in general, you know, try to be not too aggressive about how you go along and try to be as quiet as possible. Subtlety, in general, is a very, very good wall. Just be subtle about anything that you do, and also how you photograph. If you photograph aggressively, you're not thinking enough. And if you're subtle enough, you don't scare. I like to tell everybody to be very, very attentive. Both, you know, in talks that you have with people, body language, situation that you see that might take place or might occur, even the atmosphere in a place. Know when is a good time to take the camera out and when is a good time to lay it down. Try to have things develop. You know, a lot of pictures that you see here, you're saying, oh my God, he caught the right moment. I was waiting for that right moment for maybe a half an hour to happen. Or I was playing around until I felt that I really caught the moment. And as you can see, most of these projects are not looking for the Cartier-Bresson decisive moment, that somebody is exactly leaping over the pool or the bike is going next to the stairs. Not that kind of decisive moment, but much more of an emotional decisive moment. that allows a certain expression or a different kind of communication between you and the people being photographed. I talked about it before, but I cannot emphasize enough. Show respect and care to the people. If you show them that you respect them and care them, they will open up to you much more than otherwise. If people can feel it, you know, if somebody would be photographing you, you're not stupid. If you would feel that they actually are genuinely interested in what you're talking and they care and they want to portray something, you would cooperate. If you would feel that the person is, you know, has a screen and all is interested in the picture, this is what you would give them. So if you want to reach that kind of imagery, which is engaging and the right expression, to feel that people are giving themselves to you, give yourself to the people and be genuinely interested in them. If you're not genuinely interested in them, you should not be there in the first place. The project is not interesting. Let's talk about what you shouldn't do. So the first thing is, don't photograph all the time. Don't go crazy, you know, and especially as you go along and you learn to trust yourself more. You know that feeling of somebody told you, okay, don't photograph, and you hate yourself because that was the magic picture? Great, that was not the magic picture. The next picture is going to be the magic picture. Don't think about the picture that you've missed in that regard. Think about, you know, I'm a good enough photographer and I'm going to get the next picture. Especially in the documentary project, that one specific picture is not necessarily as critical. It's much more important as a whole body of work. Not only that, if you don't photograph all the time, you actually engage with the people. If you're always hunting from the camera, they don't see you. They don't see Nathan. They see a camera with legs, which is beautiful, but very hard to communicate with. We talked about the network. Another thing, don't look only for the pictures that you might have thought would be great. You know, sometimes as you're going alone, you start fantasizing, oh my God, if I had that picture, and you start having all kinds of specific pictures in mind. If it doesn't happen, that might be, you know, a great fantasy, but it's not going to happen. So look for the pictures that are going to happen. Sometimes they might actually be better than the ones you fantasized about, because we have ideas and the project evolves as we're going along, but don't be too fixated about one thing or another. Don't talk too much. Okay, so don't photograph too much. Also, don't talk too much. You know, it's a nice balance. Sometimes I talk too much. For you guys, you know, try to find a nice balance and try to see when people are really interested in what you guys have to say. Yeah.
Do you think it was beneficial for you, the fact that you knew a little bit of Spanish there, but not?
It was critical, not beneficial. If I didn't know any Spanish, I would regard as this photojournalist that doesn't care about us, that he's come here just to take the picture. I could not even engage or show. If I'm with a kid, I cannot talk to him in English. But if I knew a little bit of Spanish, suddenly like, oh, they see that I care. They feel it.
Also, if you need too much Spanish, then I don't think that would.
4. 3.5. No. I wasn't, you know, I could not give this lecture in Spanish, but I could get by.
But do you think that would help you even more on that project? If you knew more Spanish?
Yeah, the more you know, the better. You know, you can interact in a better way. You can ask better questions. People feel easier. As much as people feel that you're part of them, they're gonna open up to you more. And for me, I would not have somebody translate what just happened. I would just understand and act on it. I could hear what people were saying and know to anticipate something that's gonna happen next. Right? Well, let's take the situation here. Let's say that you want to photograph a story about the Mexican immigrants population here. Do you think that there's any chance you're gonna do that without speaking Spanish? Not in a million years. Here. Now, they speak English. They're just not going to want to speak to you in English when you're doing a project about immigration. You better know Spanish. And more than that, you better be Mexican yourself, because they're going to feel that you can really understand what's going on, and that you're not going to tell about them, because they're illegal mostly. So there's a lot of things that can help you, and you have to be aware of what are your tools and what can work against you. Okay. One last thing that you.
Colombia.
Sorry.
Why did you pick Colombia?
Colombia picked me. The question is, why did you pick Colombia? Most of my projects, I'm not necessarily choosing them. I just cannot help doing them once I'm faced with the situation. In Shirat Hayam, I just came to that place and I felt that I had no other option but just focusing on that settlement. When I was doing Colombia, I went there to do an exhibition and lectures. And before I knew it, everybody was talking around me about the displaced people. I went to photograph it, and suddenly I knew it. I just could not stop. So I didn't really pick it. Or when I went to Cambodia, I went to Cambodia first time in 2000. And I came across a hospital for children, and I learned about the healthcare situation of children there as a backpacker. I wasn't photographing them. I came back because I fantasized about doing something to help those children, so I came back. Yes?
These people are in such desperate situations. Are you ever put on the spot where they'll say, do something, help us? You know, like,
Yes.
in demand of you personally, what can you do for me?
Well, the question was, there's a lot of people in need in those pictures, and am I ever put on the spot of people asking, you know, for specific help, if I can help them, or what can I do to help them? Now, you have to be extremely careful about ethical issues here, because it's very easy to say, yeah, I'm going to help you, and no, you can't. All right? You might be able to help in giving them money on the spot, if you choose to do that. I have other ethical issues with that as well. In some cases, I think it's actually very important to do this specifically. Again, it's a case-by-case basis. If this is the nature of the engagement and you're asking somebody for their attention, so you want to respect them, and you know that monetary exchange is part of that. That you should trust. But on a regular basis, I do not want people, you know, taking part in my projects so they can gain financial. And I think also this is kind of, it doesn't fix the problem. It just takes care of the symptom for a very short period of time. Now, I also don't want to promise them something that I cannot produce. I'm not telling them, yes, this will dramatically change your situation. In most cases, I'm saying this will probably not help you. But it will help bring more awareness to the situation that you're in. And it's a voyage. I'm doing, you know, what I can. You can choose to tell me to go away now, and I'll totally respect that. Or you can choose to continue taking part of that, but I'm not going to tell you that it's going to do things that it wouldn't do. Most people actually are very frustrated to hear that, but then they trust me more. So they continue. Sure. In continuing to that, you know, I'm talking a lot about ethical parts. Another thing that you should not do not affect the situation. Don't cause something to happen just because you're photographing it. It's more than that. If you really want to be strict about your practice, don't allow somebody to construct a picture for you. So because you sometimes going to be, you know, people are working for you and they want to make you happy, so they're gonna try to think of photographers and suddenly something happens. You know, if that happens and you're honest and you think about doing things the right way, at least in my book, I might take the picture not to insult them, but I'm going to trash it afterwards. And in any case, don't affect the situation. You're there to photograph it, unless you are part of the story. And it happened to me only once in my life that me being an Israeli Jewish person was important for the story, and maybe we're going to see it later. So I promised you something completely different. Let's look how we're doing on time. Pretty good. So something completely different. As a photographer or documentary photographer, I think, and as an artist, I think that it's very important, you know, when you're working on a product, that you have something real to say. Coming to New York, as I told you, I moved here in 2008. It took me a while until I finally felt comfortable about understanding my personal relationship to the city and being able to photograph my first series here, which I'm going to share with you. First time I came to New York was 1997, and I was still there I was actually doing my MBA then. And I remember my friend telling me, you know, New York is like Tel Aviv, just bigger. Much bigger. I was staying with a friend in Brooklyn, and then we took the subway and we got out at Rockefeller Center, and I get up and I'm like, I lost my breath for a few minutes. And in the next 10 days that I spent in New York, I was amazed not only by the dazzling skyscrapers and the wide avenues. Everywhere that I looked up, I would see advertising, just attacking me from every possible angle. It was like a kaleidoscope of ads and billboards. And I didn't know what to make of it, because in Israel we had advertising, but never to that extent. I went back to Israel, and in the years to come I visited the States quite a bit, and we started getting more and more advertising also in Israel. Even one which was wall size and became famous just because of that. Here in New York it would be another wall. Here it was the wall on Halacha. It was, yeah. Moving here in 2008, I did that to do my studies at the School of Visual Arts, and 3 weeks later I had to bring pictures to school. So I grabbed my camera and went to what I considered as the symbol of the American dream, Fifth Avenue. I walked around Fifth Avenue and suddenly I came across this. I photographed this. I thought that it made kind of an interesting juxtaposition, and I like how everything was framed. And if we're talking about, you asked about the moment, so here it's a little bit more of a Cartier-Bresson kind of moment of the people in the right place. Anyway, I felt very happy with this picture. I continued another few blocks up, and I came across this. This was Juicy Couture on 52nd Street. Very different energy. I photographed it, played with this a bit, brought it to class, again with a bunch of other pictures. And I don't know, those two pictures really resonated with me. And it was also kind of shocking to me that those billboards started to come down. And I told you it took me a couple of years to decide to work on this on a little bit of a more organized level. And even kind of subconsciously during those couple of years, I continued photographing all kinds of billboards or non-billboards around the city. And about 2 years ago, I decided I wanted to work on it on a more organized level. I think this actually happened with you guys. This was while I was waiting for one of my classes in Times Square. So while the students were busy being late, suddenly this bus comes along, and as I told you, you have to be fast about what you're doing. I jumped fast and 2 clicks before it went away. So this was this Christmas. Now, it's pretty amazing how these billboards are becoming part of our urban landscape in a very, very aggressive way. I started photographing them because they lure my vision. They're constructed in order to seduce you. But then there's the question of how much do they actually seduce us? This is one of the only pictures that you actually see somebody looking at the billboards. And for most Americans, when I'm showing this series, they're kind of shocked. Where are those billboards? Foreigners would actually notice them. Now, if you would think this is the only medium that you cannot turn off. You can change the channel, turn off the radio, close the paper. You cannot turn off a billboard. You have to move this so-called the democratic space. You have to move through it. So what's the solution if you cannot turn the billboard off? You turn yourself off. So most people actually don't notice them, at least the people that I've been talking to. This is Beverly Hills. This is 52nd and Fifth Avenue. Exactly. There's also the relationship here between this some kind of not virtual, but alternative reality, this dreamy image that is projected to us, and what actually happens under it. So I want to really explore this relationship and see if what is sold to us as this dream is actually what we want or can afford for ourselves. This was actually photographed on a Sunday, guys. You know, some of these billboards, I was very lucky. Like the first two, which, trust me, that day was very lucky to get those 2 pictures, as I learned afterwards when I saw how hard it was. But this one, for instance, I think it was the 5th time that I came to photograph it that I actually nailed it. And I was always looking for some specific situation that there would be the right juxtaposition that would work really well with the billboard. Now, I'm constantly looking at the figures in these billboards, and it's a long series. I brought here just a selection of them, but I was thinking about how they both symbolize our commercial culture and creating it at the same time. Right? It's kind of an interesting duality. And then, you know, given the fact that they are, I think, very tightly connected to our culture, I try to think about other cultures. You know, the Greeks, the Romans. America is an empire, I hope, still. So I look back at the other empires, and they also had things that symbolize their cultures, mostly statues. Unfortunately, now in New York, if you want to see statues, you go to the Met or I don't know, somewhere in some of the parks. But statues are not part of our culture anymore. These are our modern statues, guys. This is what is creating your culture and also symbolizing it at the same time, as opposed to the statues, though, that stay there for centuries. It's a very ethereal landscape. It disappears after a few weeks. And it's kind of also nice to see the vibe of the city in this case.
What time of the day would you go hunting for these pictures?
That's also, the question was, what time of the day would I go hunting for this picture? I like the name hunting. I didn't feel like a hunter, but yes, there was. No. It was maybe hunter is the way to call it. I would look always for a time of the day, in most cases, that the billboard will be evenly lit. And evenly lit in most cases would mean when the sun is not hitting it. So, like in this case, in most cases it was actually pretty comfortable. I'll give you here. This is the other example that it's totally lit by sunlight, but in sunlight you have a much more contrasty picture, and I would have to be very mindful about how do I process the picture afterwards. Now, if you were wondering, these are not necessarily full-frame pictures. Some of them are cropped, and I'll show you a little bit of this afterwards. Yes, sir.
Where were you standing and how did you avoid the crossing traffic on the avenue?
Okay. The question was, where am I standing and how do I avoid the passing traffic? Well, this specific picture is one of the rare ones that I was actually standing on scaffolding, that I was lucky that they were there. Why I was lucky? Especially because then I could photograph and get the inside of this construction site. Because if I would be at street level, you would see much less of it. But in most cases, I would just be on the other side of the street photographing, and you would, I would wait for the light to change. If I come at the time of the day and there would be traffic jams, that's it. I can continue doing some other business because there's no chance. Sometimes I would photograph between the cars moving by, and I, just like trying to really snap. And sometimes I would just curse the New York taxi drivers, especially, that would just pop. And sometimes I would try to incorporate them in the picture, but it never really worked. We talked about this picture with Make Life One Long Weekend. The main reason I had to come 5 times because there would always be somebody parked there next to this guy, or something happened. On Sunday, no cars because it's a commercial area, and on Sundays there's not too much business being done there. In this case as well, I had to come quite a few times, and photograph a few pictures, at some of which I was not as happy with, some of them more. But I didn't really feel that everything resonated perfectly. At one point it did, and that's it. And this one as well. This one was photographed along 1 hour, but that was the only hour I came there. And when this guy just looked up, it was just, you feel it. I think all of you as photographers, sometimes you feel it as you look through the viewfinder and something magical happens. You just can't wait to get back home and see it for real. This and this are very close to each other. The different breaks that one takes versus one wants to take. You asked about times of the day. In some pictures, it was actually better to take them towards nighttime. As for instance, in this case, this was also a billboard that was there for almost only 2 weeks. Now, some of the friends that I would share this with, before they never saw those billboards, but once they saw the project, they would start texting me with pictures. Here's one on 48th Street. Here's one on Soho. So it became much easier to do the project. This actually I got in one day. As they put it up, 3 messages from 3 different friends. There's a mushroom sign. You have to see the mushroom sign. Well, I went to see the mushroom sign, and under it, instead of dreams and everything that is portrayed there, I say guards and barriers. This is New York for you.
Film or digital?
All of the question is if I'm using film or digital. All of this is strictly digital, just because I feel more comfortable and it's much cheaper. I would love to photograph it with medium format or large format, and I know that I'm a little bit impaired in terms of my process and how much I actually photograph in those processes to be able to do it properly. And other than that, I'm sorry to say I don't have the budgets. If I had somebody supporting this project in an organic way, I might want to photograph it even in a larger format, just because then I could also do larger prints. But this is photographed with, I'm a Canon shooter. Sorry for all you Nikon guys or other guys, but right now, most of this was photographed with the 1DS Mark III. Some of it now is also being photographed with the 5D Mark III. It's important. The file size is critical for me, and also how to process it later, because I see myself as a fine artist, and how I print my pictures is critical.
Is there a
Yeah, sorry.
concern that you're photographing someone else's work?
The question is if there's any concerns regarding copyrights, if I'm appropriating somebody else's work. No. Why? Because this is a part of our common space. And not only that, I'm not just photographing it and displaying this as the piece of art. I'm interpreting it.
Yeah.
I'm putting it into a situation. And I'm very sensitive about that, because I would never want anybody to steal my picture, so I'm the last person wanting to steal somebody else's picture. Yes, sir.
Do you feel, this is really beautiful art.
Thank you.
Do you feel more freedom to affect the situation in a case like this with the billboards? Let's say if somebody would notice you and maybe stand there
Well, the question was that if I feel in this kind of work, if I will feel more comfortable affecting the situation. For instance, if somebody would see me and then they would place themselves there, or somebody would do something. Same answer, guys. If anybody is doing anything because I'm there, that's a problem. Even if they notice me and they looked at the billboard because of me, that's a problem. You know, they have to look at the billboard because they noticed it themselves. I had a few friends that ask if they can be in the billboards. You know, just tell us when we are, and we'll just walk there by mistake. It's going to be our private joke. I might do that as a present, but not as part of my project. And again, it's not necessarily something that, in this case, I would feel less. Well, actually, I want the juxtaposition there to be there for real, because if not, then my comment about this commercial world is not full. You know, it's not, and this is also part why I'm not doing composites here. Everything that you see here is one shot. Nothing here is photoshopped. So if I would take and make maybe very more comfortable or even stronger picture in that sense, yes, but then you would not believe them and say, okay, the photographer has his own ideas about reality and he's trying to portray me something. No, I'm showing you reality, and it's your time to let your personal ideas kick in. So yeah, it's also part of our buses now, which is even more interesting as part of our urban landscape that is actually moving in front of us all the time. This was on Herald Square. Very interesting to see, you know, what Gap is trying to make us look like and how it actually makes us look like. So, be bright. This was one of the later ones that I photographed. Apparently, the phenomena gets bigger and bigger and bigger. This is why in 2008 I was not sure if there were only 2 billboards and, you know, I got 2 lucky shots, or if this is a phenomena. And it took me a couple of years to really see this as a phenomena. The phenomena is getting bigger and bigger. This is in Soho, on West Broadway. There's going to be a Cavalli shop there apparently. And again, this is one of those moments that I see always as a documentary photographer. Serendipity is my worst enemy and my best friend at the same time. You know, you have to wait for the image, but when it happens, magic. So in this one, I photographed this billboard. There were all kinds of nice things, but nothing really resonated. And I was keep thinking, like, what will need to happen here to really make the picture? Sometimes you can fantasize about this. Sometimes you just hope that, you know, when the situation happens, you have to be there to acknowledge it. And so I went to photograph another billboard in Soho, and then I came back, and as I was coming back, I saw somebody looking at the billboard, like, oh my God, this is perfect. I ran, and missed him. So I cursed him, and again told you, don't, the picture that I just missed. I continued photographing, and 2 minutes later, this gentleman comes by, and he comes with his bag, and suddenly he turns towards me, and he's the only one that actually noticed me. And he just stares at me. And I don't know, I just sense this power with it, and I could not explain it. Something just said, like, this is a very interesting situation. And looking at it on my computer, so like, all of them are white. You know, and suddenly there was this weird juxtaposition that I could never imagine that this would actually happen. And the question of which kind of advertising are we using and why are we using this kind of advertising is also part of this project. Taking off or taking on. Sorry.
Did he question you when you were taking the photo?
The question was if that guy was questioning me. No.
So he let you take the photo?
Yeah, he stood there, and part of when you try to see if the person feels comfortable with you photographing, sometimes you don't necessarily have to ask a question. You know, they notice you're with the camera, they see you raising it up, they know what's going to happen. If they turn away, that means they're probably not happy with it. So I usually try to respect it. Why usually? Because if, for instance, they're going to be in the middle of something very newsworthy, where there is no other way but photograph, they should know better than put themselves in that situation if they don't want to be photographed. Basically, once you walk out to the public space, you lose your right for privacy, I think. A lot of people, you know, in America, you have the sense of personal space, and there's a very mental definition about, very social definition. It's very different than the legal one, right? So.
Throughout any of these pictures, taking photos of, you know, these advertisements, has any of the people harassed you? Like, hey, why are you taking a picture of me? Or?
The question was, while I was photographing this, did any of the people harass me or anything? In this case specifically, not. Because first of all, I was maybe because I was on the other side of the street, so not too noticing. And if they did notice, most of them would smile. There was actually the recent billboard that I photographed. I was photographing 2 guys putting up a billboard, and they were looking at me like kind of what the heck, but they were working, so they cannot really stop me. And then when they get down, I was coming over and explaining what I was doing and giving them an invitation to my exhibition, which they were thrilled about. So it's also about how you engage those kinds of situations. When somebody asks you, explain what you're doing. If there's nothing wrong with what you're doing, that's great. If the person is just an a-hole, then walk away. Yes, sir.
So the problem with the release, if you want to publish one of these, not publish, but, you know, make a profit out of these pictures, they're obviously recognizable people.
Not if you say
So how, do you have to sign a release or
Okay, the question was regarding release forms, and if I have, okay, I don't sign, nobody here is signed on any release forms, and it's not about making, if I would use that as an advertisement, I would be in trouble. I cannot use this as an advertisement. But as part of my fine art, definitely. We can photograph people on the street in this regard without having their consent. That's not the issue. The issue is gaining commercial profit out of it. And there's a very famous case of Philippe Lorca de Corsia, which photographed people in Times Square. He worked on a very interesting series called Heads, placing lights on all kinds of scaffolding and using a telephoto camera about 6-10 feet away from his subjects, photographing about head size, and then choosing 17 people out of 3,000, which he called the series Heads. One of them was an ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jew that didn't appreciate the fact that he was photographed, and he sued him. They went to court, it went through 3 appeals, and Philippe de Corsia won. And in an interview, he said like he's not sure that he would want it to happen to him, that he would be wanting that he would want to be photographed. But once you move into the public space, you lose your sense for privacy and also the right not to be photographed. So in that regard, I don't need the releases. If I would need to put it in my own personal work or have this published or doing artwork, if I'm using this as an advertisement for Dolce & Gabbana without the releases, I'm in deep trouble.
no, but suppose you want to release a book. You
No
want to
problem.
publish all this to make a book.
No, there's no problem. No. For that matter, you could say that every street photographer that ever existed would have to take a release from every person on the street. It's a little bit of too much to ask. Yes, sir.
You said you didn't do Photoshop, but did you do some cleanup or your approach as a photojournalist?
Okay, the question was in terms of the.
I mean, the composition is great, but look at this big blackboard and you don't see any smudge or anything.
There's a lot of smudges. You just have to look careful. There's a lot, and I actually kept them in. You know what? Let me see if I can get
Even on the
closer.
floor, you see, not
Come on,
dirty.
get closer. No, not closer. Aye. What did I do? And space. Go back. On the contrary. Okay, so the question was in terms of digital processing, if I cleaned up my pictures a little bit to make them look a little bit more aesthetic. The answer is no. I would take out if there's any kind of dust particles or stuff like that, or the equivalent be if you guys are working in film, if after scanning you would take out any kind of scratches to the film or dust. That is totally legit. But I would not fix my picture in this case. This is the reality. And since I do work both as a photojournalist and a fine artist, my ethics in this case is crucial for me. And I feel that once you cross the line, that's it, you're lost, you're going to continue. Now, there's a difference between how this was photographed and how this will be printed. There is a difference. Every picture that ever was photographed either or film or digitally has to be processed in a certain way to allow a picture to actually get to where it needs to be. There's a difference between processing it carefully in a documentary fashion that respects the actual event that did happen and changing the pictures and making it look nicely. So, unfortunately, there's a lot of young photojournalists that do it quite heavily. That before 20 years ago, in order to do all kinds of fixes, you would have to have a master printer or somebody in a big room with a computer that had amazing technical skills and pay him thousands of dollars. Now you can actually press click and it works. So thank God for Photoshop, but this was not created to change our reality in a way that we cannot perceive it necessarily. And I feel as journalists, you know, if more and more journalists do too much artistic work to their pictures, then eventually they're cutting the branch on which they're sitting down. They're going to hit the ground. You know, and also as a photographer, I don't aspire to be a better graphic designer. If the picture is not good enough, I should learn to photograph better. And so should you and everybody else. Yes?
Along these lines, when you're talking about making adjustments to pictures, is converting a color image to a black and white, would that be crossing the line?
The question was if converting a color picture to black and white is crossing the line. No, it's not. You could also do that before, you know, in a dark room. You would take a slide, and yeah, with that I have no problem. Hopefully you're going to do it well. And again, while you're doing that, try to keep honest with the situation that you actually photographed. Okay. Again, we talked about the gods of photography, and sometimes they again arrange this situation that God knows how this hot dog vendor did not see the Dolce & Gabbana sign, or if he felt more comfortable with this, sure. Dolce & Gabbana hot dogs, people. This is an ad for real estate property. And what is better to sell a real estate property than a body of a woman, right? It makes perfect sense. I don't know. Apparently it does to Thor Equities. This was on 34th Street, again, one of the earlier billboards that I was just photographing as I live on 33rd, so walking on 34th happens quite a lot. Now there's a big store there.
Nathan?
Yes.
With all due respect,
Yeah.
I just never traveled streets that are so absent of litter. I mean, your sidewalks,
They're just so clean.
Well, the question was again, with all due respect, how come the streets are so clean? They are not. That's one thing. You just see them bigger. And other than that, there's a lot of people working the streets to clean them. Some of them actually have been photographed. Where are you guys? All right. So, and the streets are dirty. Now, the thing is, because this is a very large sign, the dirt is small in comparison. So this is why you might not see it, and it's hard to. Now look at all the stains here on the floor. I could, you say Photoshop out the white paint or all the things. It's going to look more even, right? Or all the cigarettes. Can you see the cigarette butts next to that guy smoking cigarettes? This is because this is the cigarettes party zone. Yeah. So where were we? We were here and here, and see this one and. This one was, when I photographed the first two body billboards, I continued on Fifth Avenue, and eventually I got to the north of Fifth Avenue, and I photographed this lady. Not as part of the billboard series, she was just there, again, 3 weeks after I moved here. This was photographed 4 years later on a Zara billboard. Again, fourth time I came there was the first 3 times were not very effective. And I photographed her, and then she's in the same posture with the same blanket for now 5 years, because I actually came across her 2 weeks ago again. It's kind of a sad situation. If you go on Fifth Avenue, you're probably going to come across her. What happened afterwards was that a policeman or a guard of Zara came there and asked her if she can move, because she doesn't portray the billboard that well. And when I first photographed it, I was a little bit frustrated that people probably don't notice her. But then a friend of mine told me, this is the perfect metaphor for our, we don't want to look at the homeless people. We prefer to look at the billboard. But the homeless is there, and we notice it, and it's bugging our vision, and this is how it should be. So, well, sometimes the juxtaposition is just the right moment in the right time. Remember the Dolce Gabbana sign? This is a few months later. I would sometimes return to the few situation. Again, light, this is one of the only ones that the light is really uneven on the billboard, but the light and the specific moment kind of make the picture. And if you're wondering by this point where are the billboards, then maybe I touched the right chord with you guys, and you can a little bit contemplate it a little bit more. This series is now exhibited. The first it was released about 2-3 weeks ago. And it's on. You can actually see the prints and all the dirt and everything else at Anastasia Photo Gallery in the Lower East Side. It's on 166 Orchard Street. It's going to be there until May 19th. So I would invite you to go there. There's a few postcards here for whoever wants that you can take with you, so you don't forget where it is. Thank you.
For more information, please visit us online, give us a call, or stop by our New York City Superstore. You can also connect with us on the web.